For this evening, Councillor Fry. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask, at the moment it's Chris. Do you have a declaration of interest, Chris? I take it as a no. Okay, the only announcement of sort I have is, of course, this is the last meeting of this council year. So I thank Chris and the other panel members who always work very hard, especially around budget time. So thanks for everything. And we've got a nice fat lot of papers for today. Nice way to end the council year. So I can see we won't have cameras then for Nigel or Chris at the moment. The other Chris has joined. Hello, Chris. So thanking everyone for being on the panel this year and Celeste for keeping us in order. We are asked to agree the notes of the meeting, the last meeting. I had, if I may, one very minor thing. I asked, it must have been Laura Bethel, about there was this case law. This is something I often encounter where people are, when they're 5 weeks in a month and suddenly they're tipped over the threshold and they lose all their free school meals and everything else. And I asked about averaging it over a period. And it was said, and maybe this is for Celeste to note, can we ask, I assume it's Laura, about the result of, there was a Court of Appeal case about this, which actually is potentially very important for many residents who are just at that borderline between getting and losing benefits. So I'm sure we can be updated. I don't know whether the Court of Appeal has published its appeal yet. Were there any other comments from panel members? That was the only one I had. If not, thank you very much. Let's take it quickly. Does anyone have any comments on the work plan, which of course will be in the new council year? It seemed fine to me. I don't see any disagreement among members. So let's go straight then to invite Ed to introduce the social value and procurement update with the new legislation in effect. And Ed's going to introduce it, and then we will turn to Annette Osborne. So over to you, Ed.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. And above all, thanks to the panel for its hard work this year, James. I'm glad you mentioned that. And you mentioned there were a lot of big papers, but I know you wouldn't have it any other way. And I think the input and the challenge, particularly around the budget, is really, really useful. A chunk of the update is the things which I think Annette, being at the front line and actually making this happen through our procurement, is much better place to comment on. I think there were 3 headline things I wanted to quickly reflect on. One is the report intimates some of the challenges in implementing social value provisions when you have decentralized procurement, and I think that's natural, and that's something which I know she and colleagues are really working to get to grips with, and we're probably on a journey, and that's inevitable, but I'm sure she'll want to reflect on how that journey is going, and I think that will improve as time goes on. Secondly, I am struck, even if some of the contributions are relatively modest, by the fact that by including this, actually we've been able to achieve quite a lot, and I think it's impressive. And I think in the sort of words that my late old man would have used, don't ask, don't get. And here we've asked and we've got. I think that's good and important. The third thing, and I'm probably about to open up a can of worms, James. Yes. We passed a motion at the last council meeting, which touched on a number of issues, including procurement, but also treasury and other things, and taking into account various ethical concerns there. And I think the thought on those is that we will bring forward options for members to understand as best we can in a timely way. Inevitably, I think that's going to end up being aligned with our budget process, because I think in the case of Treasury management, not the subject of today's discussion, that's when our Treasury management plan is agreed. treasury management strategy is agreed. It sits alongside the budget. So we'll need to look at that. And then in the case of our policies as well, if there are any budgetary implications, then again, we need to make provision for those at budget time. So I just wanted to reassure the panel that that's not dropped off the radar. I think it's important when council votes on motions that those are then properly considered, but that was the way forward, which I think should be in line with the conversation that we had at our last council meeting. That was risky because it was off-piste, but I hope it's useful. And I would now take any comments on those very brief political headlines or pass over to Annette.
Any questions? Can I see any hands raised from panel members? No. I think you did a great job there. Oh, there we are, Chris Jarvis. Please, Chris.
Hoping my mic is now working. I can see that it is great. So this may be a question for you, Ed, or it may be something to be picked up. But it relates directly to that point around the previous motion. I guess my question is not necessarily about the financial ramifications of any decision making around procurement in light of the various asks within that, but more around the legal framework for it. And obviously the wording of the motion was such that it acknowledged the sort of restrictive environment around procurement. And so I guess it would be useful to get a sort of a sense and overview of what is and is not possible to deliver in the thrust of that motion when it comes to specifically procurement. We can pick up treasury management, obviously, at a different time.
Yeah. Can I jump back? Can I jump back in there and give my sense of that? I mean, the point's well made. So, and I don't want to address this on the fly. My understanding is the sentiment of council was that it set out some things that it wanted to consider, but it acknowledged the legal parameters. And my sense is that the council would want to go as far as it can within those legal parameters, but those legal parameters do exist. So I think the kind of question of officers will then be, if they look at what can be done, what is legal, and then they can set that out. Now, there might be a couple of caveats to that. One is the financial one, that then I think options are on the table. There might also be ones about, I suppose, at the margin about legal risk. And again, if there are decisions there, I think officers would have to surface them. But as far as I'm concerned, we've had a steer, and it's then for officers to try and provide granular advice, clear advice as we go through the process.
Is that okay, Chris? Thanks very much. Any other questions for Ed before he has to go elsewhere? If not, thanks very much for joining this, Ed. And we will hand over to Annette, who knows everything we need to know about procurement, I'm sure. Do you want to say a few introductory words? Your report is fortunately not too long, and so I assume that we have already read it. Are there any key points you want to highlight?
No, I think the key point sort of like dovetails into to what Ed just said, which was that we are making progress. It's slow progress, but we're definitely making progress on social value with the work we're doing with OSEP and OXLEP. And I think OXLEP are now going to take ownership of Match My Project. They've got some funding to be able to do that across all of Oxfordshire. So South Oxfordshire, Vale of Whitehorse, Cherwell, and West Oxfordshire are all joining in that. So I'm hoping that that will give us some momentum on Match My Project, which sits at the back end of social value. It's when a contract is awarded, then Match My Project comes into it. But it's slow progress because we've had other, a really important thing to deliver, which is the new Procurement Act. But we are making progress on it. So that's probably the headline on social value.
Indeed, I'm going to, excuse me, invite panel members if they have questions. I have one or two, but I'll let the others go first. Chris Smoten. We can't hear you, Chris.
How about that? So with the cases that we've dealt with so far, with Match My Projects. So we've had a few finish and was it 9 or 10 that are in flight at the moment. What has the reception been like when it comes to the difference between contributing financially or contributing in terms of some sort of benefit in kind, in terms of like volunteer hours, or perhaps potentially physical goods? How have people been preferring to engage there?
I think the results that I've had a look at so far, it's more around hours delivered rather than sort of pounds in terms of contribution. So I think there's been, I had an update, a further update, but I think we're still sat at 199 hours delivered in the last year from 3 projects. And I think there are about 8 in progress at the moment.
And what's your take on the relative merits between their contributing in that way versus simply paying them some slightly less amount for the whatever services they're providing, and the council directly fulfilling whatever it is that they are contributing?
I think we give suppliers a choice, and they need to decide how best to deliver that choice for us. Fundamentally, if they're doing a lot of work, and I think recently there was some garden cleaning or something, that's a really good impact socially. When people take a look at a particular area and see that it's nice and tidy and looking good. So there is a value there, but it's really difficult for us then to establish what the value of that deliverable is when we're evaluating what they've done for us. So there's a bit of a mixture from our point of view, but if we can get them to deliver and we can see the results of that delivery, then that's good.
So I guess what I'm getting at, and sorry, do interrupt me, Chair, if you want to take control back. I suppose what I'm getting at is obviously we can just have ODS do the kind of work that you're describing there. Do we get the impression that we're getting benefit from having suppliers deliver that versus simply ourselves commissioning ODS or anybody else to do it in a conventional fashion?
I'd probably say yes, because we would have to pay ODS to do the work, whereas it's being done as part of a contract so that it adds value to the contract, and it's committing the suppliers. You know, we asked for them to commit to social value, and now we're making them deliver that social value rather than just it being perhaps a tick box exercise when they fill in their tender documents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do other panel members, Ian or other Chris, do you have any questions?
Yes, please. Obviously, there was a bit of an impact upon headcount that is stated in here. So it does seem, obviously, that value, I suppose, when we talk about having to pay for the things, there is obviously a bit of an offset against the headcount. As this maybe becomes wider, do we see sort of further headcount changes? And also, what was, just out of interest, because I didn't see that the secondment, because there was previously a secondment in place, so this kind of didn't necessarily change the headcount entirely because of the secondment position. But I was curious what that secondment was in terms of the electric vehicle dynamic purchasing system.
Okay, so if I start with so the headcount is related to the New Procurement Act rather than social value, but the secondment that we had was to manage the electric vehicle dynamic purchasing system, which we put in at the council, and we opened it up for other local authorities to use, and from that we obtained a fee for undertaking some of the work for them. And so the secondment that we had in procurement was primarily to manage and run competitions on behalf of other local authorities using our dynamic purchasing system. So you're right, it isn't an increase in the head count, but what we're going to now do is move that person from delivering the electric vehicle dynamic purchasing system purely into a procurement role. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, I believe you're on mute.
I wanted just to follow up Chris Moten's point, where people offer to do, and you gave the example of things like gardening or something. I mean, it would be interesting if councillors or parish councillors knew if this were something that might be important in submitting a bid, if they had the kind of probably relatively small scale projects which would love some volunteer help. Is it possible to have any system which could maybe indicate? I wonder if people could approach you, I suppose it'd be you, Annette, to suggest where, if firms were willing, these are open doors in terms of volunteering. Would that make any sense?
It would. I'm not looking after Match My Project. That's going to move to Oxlep. It's sat with Clayton Llewellyn and his team, but I think Oxlep are going to manage it. But it is a portal, and you could have access to that portal. And you can put specific tasks on that portal. So if you've got something within your community that's really important to you, and you're talking to your community, they can add a task onto the portal, and it will sit there until a supplier comes along that's perhaps been awarded a contract and they now want to undertake some work. Then they can have a look at those projects and they can say, well, I'd like to do this project. There's a bit of matchmaking that goes up in the background. And if it's accepted, they then come and do the project for you. And it doesn't need to just be a project. It could be a donation for something, you know, anything. You can literally put anything on the portal, is my understanding.
Sorry, are potential bidders aware that this opportunity, these options exist?
Yeah, within our template documents, so within all of our quotation documents, we link all suppliers. We basically advise suppliers that that we partnered with Match My Project. We give a link to Match My Project, and we ask them to obviously have a look there before they submit their bids.
Thank you very much. I had, if I may, a couple of other questions. One was just a question of fact. I know, for example, that the leisure contract, there was an appeal against the award of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
How many appeals have you had, let's say, in the last year against procurement decisions?
I think we've had 3 in the last year, and they were all around the same time. So I haven't had any so far this year, but yeah, we had 3.
How did we fare? How did the council fare? Did it win?
Yes. Yeah, we before we closed standstill in each case, we were able to justify the decision, and it was accepted by all parties.
Thank you very much. I had one other question. I mean, you talk about not getting fully staffed until June, and I just wondered, the Act has now been in place since February. Are we waiting until you're fully staffed to be able to implement the Act, or is it already, from your point of view, up and running? Or I'm not quite sure, with the changing structure you described, where the implementation would lie.
We're up and running. We had a moratorium for 1 month, which was just a risk-based decision, because every supplier has to register on the central digital platform to be able to bid for an above threshold procurement, and the central digital platform only opened at go live. So there was a risk for running above threshold procurements that suppliers would not be able to bid. So that's why we had a moratorium for a month, but that finished on the 23rd of March. And we've been posting notices and running procurements under the new Act.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. I don't see any hands raised or anything. So, Annette, I would like to thank you very much for the report. It's nice and brief and clear. And looking forward to seeing a year of implementation under the new Act. But thanks very much.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Goodbye. Now we need to go. There's always this form of words, which of course I don't have on my screen right now. I could ask Celeste to read it out, but basically we need to go into confidential session for the discussion of ODS's business plans. I think since you've all been panel members for a while, I will take it as given that you know the formula, which has to be read out. So I hope you agree that we should now go into confidential session. Celeste will still record, but it won't be